Today I'm sharing 10 website design trends that I'm already seeing on bold, beautiful websites, when to use them, when to skip them, how to pair them, how to avoid pairing them, and lots more. And yes, there's one that I thought I would hate until I actually used it myself. Now, let's start with the trend that is brand new and which is going to dominate this year unlike any other. Trend number 1, moody, rich, saturated tones. When it comes to color, moody is a vibe. Chris Loves Julia is an interior design company and their website epitomizes this trend. We can just see like really warm, rich brown tones, some reds and burgundies and raspberry colors. Dark greens. This feels very Ralph Lauren in a website. This begonia template also has a dark, deep green as the primary color and primary background, which normally we're used to backgrounds being white or beige, but now we're going for color backgrounds and not just any color, but something really intense. Studio Ember has mixed in the moodiness with their images. They're doing some black and white images, some color images, and then also we have this beautiful green and a really rich yellow too. Over on Julia Berzelheimer's website, I was so interested to see this one because I just redid my website design last year. And then when I went on Julia's, I realized, you know what? We have a very similar color palette happening on our websites. I feel like you can see the moody rich tones specifically in the Julia Berzelheimer logo that's happening down here on the left-hand side. You can see the selection of all the different colors which they chose. All the colors are really rich, really bold. This is the opposite of light and area, which we've seen for so many years now. Now, this next website, this is a template for a bar, and so this dark, dingy, moody vibe really just fits naturally and lends itself really well to any type of business like this, but honestly, it can also, as we see, be used by someone like a lifestyle blogger or an interior designer. Which brings me over to this next website here. This is a photographer, and photographers are so well known for the light and airy. Specifically, this photographer does weddings, elopements, families, couples, and boudoir, and so this is not a website that you would usually see a really moody color palette on, but they have pulled this off gorgeously. And then we have the fabulous Taylor and her new website and album, and black as a background for a website is definitely a statement. Then you add in the really rich and saturated orange and greens and blues happening in this, and this is a very unusual mixture that we're seeing here. And then we have my most recent website design. I used to have the light and airy. It was a lot of whites and very light blues on my website and brand for years and years and years. But last year I decided, you know what? I really want to do something which feels a lot more grown up, a lot more mature, a lot more elevated. And so I went for some really rich hues on this website. So as you can see from our examples, this kind of color palette really can relay itself and be used well from anything from a bar website to a photographer website. It really just depends on sort of the vibe of that specific brand, not so much just specifically what industry you're in. Now, in terms of how long this trend is going to stay fresh and feel fresh for, I would give this one actually a couple of years. Reason being is that this is still a pretty new trend to my list. This is not something I saw a couple of years ago. This is something which is really getting mainstream, becoming pretty common. Really just in the past like few months to a year have I started noticing this, and again, really with a select few businesses. I do think that this is the year that this one is going to go a lot more mainstream, and when people are refreshing their website this year, this is something which I think a lot of people are going to lean into even if they never have thought of their brand in this way before. Trend number 2 is textured backgrounds. Think things that look like canvas or parchment paper instead of just your typical block background colors. This website here has used it in a couple of sections. The first top header section, this very clearly looks like an old piece of parchment paper, and then as I scroll down and get to this green background section, it's a little bit harder to see. It's not as clear as the parchment paper earlier, but there is very clearly, definitely, this is not just your typical like green background color. They've actually given it a bit of texture. Same thing in a section on my website. I actually took an image of parchment paper and then used that to be my background for this section to give it a bit more life and interest on an otherwise slightly plain section with just a bunch of text on it. Moving along, this is a Squarespace template. They've done the same thing. Looks like parchment paper, but it's actually in this way a little bit different because they've gone ahead and done it in a black color. And then in their love letter section, they have very specifically made their client testimonials look like a love letter by actually, again, putting it on a piece of parchment paper. And then this website here went for this look sort of layered on top of each other. So the background is definitely just an image of parchment paper. And then even they have borders around some of the other images, which are also like an additional layer of that same idea. Same thing as we scroll down here, these green sections, they have texture to them. This is not just a plain block of color in the background. If you want your brand to give off a really heritage type feeling, then this is obviously a fantastic trend to be using. This is also a relatively new trend. I would not say that this has by any means gone mainstream yet. So this is something which, if you do put it on your website now, is gonna still look quite unique. Trend number 3, this one is massive and it is sweeping the internet and I love it, honestly. Beige is the new white background. Now, I don't think you should follow every trend, but I think this is a trend which I would say that most businesses would benefit from using. So for years in website design, we spoke about white backgrounds and white space on your website, but actually now we should really swap that for beige space on your website and beige backgrounds, because beige is a much more warm, calming, neutral tone, whereas white can feel very clinical and kind of cold. This gets into a whole other topic, but brand seasons. If your brand is in the winter season, then that is more of a cool tone. So white fits if your brand is a winter season. Now there's 4 seasons total, 3 of them are not winter, which means that actually something like beige fits a lot better for actually most businesses. So if you don't want your business to give off a really striking and kind of cold tone, then actually beige, I would just change it just slightly inside your style editor of your website from pure, clean, crisp white to a slight neutral beige color, and that's gonna really warm up everything. It'll take your website from feeling clinical to feeling instead calm and elevated and a bit more also expensive maybe too. Now, this is one which I am seeing a lot more on the internet right now, and even though that is true, I would still say it is worth following this trend, not for every business, but for many, many businesses. Sometimes people like to avoid trends because they don't just want to be following the crowd, which I fully and totally understand. But actually in this case, I'd break that rule with this one. On the WikiKit website, this is a fashion label, which I absolutely adore. You will notice that their background color is a beige. There is actually really no just stark white happening on here. Also on this website, we have our Moody vibes, we have our background sections with green, but then we come to, again, the sort of like more plain background section, and we are finding a beige color here. Same thing on this Billy Show It template. Same on this Sunday Muse Show It template. We're actually seeing a couple different shades, darker and lighter beige happening on this website here as well. And same thing on my recent website design. You won't find a pure white anywhere on this website anymore, even though that used to be what I had. There's beige all throughout this thing. Trend number 4 is nostalgia. So this is where we go onto websites and we're really getting this feeling that we're being brought back in time. Different designers have definitely chosen different time periods to be focusing their efforts on, but just when you go back, you can tell that this doesn't look like ultra modern. We're actually intentionally making this look a bit more classic, a bit more out of the history books. This heirloom website has managed it by first just their imagery at the very top, and also sort of they've seemed to put some sort of like overlay, or they're also trying to get the images to not be perfectly crisp and clear. They look very much so like shot on a film type camera. The heading font choice specifically, alongside some very handwritten looking scripty text. The photos chosen. The design of the website absolutely looks modern. This is really like exceptionally a well done website because it looks current, but it's clearly heralding back to a completely different period in time. And they've managed to pull this off in so many different aspects of the website and pulled it all together. It's not just the images, it's not just the font, it's not just the embossing. All of these bits and pieces are pulled together to create this feeling when you're on the website. Same thing, this is a past student of mine, Freya Rose Tanner. She always has the most incredible website designs, and she also is very much so giving off this nostalgia feeling through a few different things. So definitely through her choice of font in the background here, the portfolio, this looks very old school. Then we come down, her images, the use of parchment paper, the use of these backgrounds, the use of love notes, and it really looking like an actual like handwritten note. All of these bits and pieces are giving serious nostalgia vibes. Melissa Griffith's new Future Current website is definitely calling back to a different time than the previous 2 websites, which I've just showed you, but this also feels a bit nostalgic as we go through the website. This is also an incredible website, which I found on Pinterest, and I just feel like this has every single thing in it, which could make you think old school. So we have an ancient looking camera in the background. We have what looks like a piece of parchment paper, which is taped up with a piece of physical tape. We have a postcard with a stamp on it. We have some really 1920s feeling fonts happening here. This is nostalgia all over this website. This Lucia website is making use of a lot of black and white imagery in order to give off that feeling. And the Casey Gunn website is doing this again through our sort of textured backgrounds, embossing, black and white images, and also the choice of fonts. Now, when it comes to implementing this trend, a common mistake which I see is that you just do this in one piece of the website, but not consistently. This is a trend that I feel like you need to fully 100% commit to in order for this to not look odd and off. You need to infuse this through your photos, through your text, through your backgrounds, through your colors. All of those things need to come together to actually properly give off this feeling. Now, this trend also pairs really well, and you'll have noticed it in some of these websites. It pairs really well with some of the other trends we've already talked about. The textured backgrounds, definitely that pairs very well. Also, beige is the new white, pairs very well. And depending on the brand, this one can also fit really well with the whole moody, rich, saturated tones and colors. Now, ironically, I feel like this nostalgia trend is actually a newer trend. This is something which we're just starting to see more and more of, and so I think that this one will continue to grow for years to come. Trend number 5 is mixed fonts. So typically on a website, you would see a heading text, for example, written all in the same sort of font type and all the same way. So either all uppercase or all lowercase or capitalized, for example. But now I am very frequently seeing either one letter or one word or bits and pieces of a heading is actually mixed up. So some of it's all uppercase. Meanwhile, the next line down is italicized and bolded, for example. Here on the Cult Classics websites, they've done this with the first letter of a few words. On the KT Mary website, she's done it where she has everything uppercase and standard text, but then the and is lowercase and italicized. This is another version where we have all uppercase on the first line and then lowercase and italicized on the second line. And the Casey Gunn website has done that similarly, with the that being the italicized lowercase bit. Now, when to use this trend, when to avoid this trend, this one I would say, really want to hold off to only heading text for this. If you're doing this in a paragraph, this would absolutely be way too much and make your website very difficult to actually read and consume. I will say that this trend is one which has actually been around for a couple of years. I think we're going to continue seeing it throughout this year, but this has been around for a little while, so I would say it has a little bit less of a lifespan in it probably than some of the other ones that we've been discussing so far. I'd say honestly, give this one a year and then it's going to start feeling stale and just very standard. Now, in terms of pairing trends, I would say this one pairs really well with nostalgia. A lot of the websites for my nostalgia examples are similar here, and there's a reason for that. Now, if you're watching this and thinking, wonder if I could be a web designer too, then that is exactly why I created the Dream Client Booking Blueprint. It is a 5-day guided challenge designed to help you land your first dream web design client without all of the overwhelm. Whether you are just starting out or pivoting into website design, this challenge provides daily bite-sized tasks to help you build your confidence and, most importantly, your client base. You're going to define your ideal client, you'll price your services with clarity, craft a really compelling portfolio, even if you don't have any clients to speak of right now, and learn how to craft a winning pitch. So if you're ready to turn your design passion into a paid profession, then check out the blueprint. It is exceptionally affordable, meaning you can test out a potential design career for less than the price of dinner. Click the link in the description below to secure your copy of the Dream Client Booking Blueprint. Trend number 6 is embossing on your website. So embossing is typically something that you would see on a stamp or on a piece of physical card or printed paper. But now people have started taking it and putting it onto websites, and I'm in love with this one. I have put this on my website myself because I like it so much. On this heirloom template, we can see the top left-hand corner, the Paris, France, and destination, also the artistry preserved for generations. Actually, yeah, I even think even that heirloom fine art photography, it's all embossed. And maybe even that H logo too. So yeah, basically everything feels like it's kind of pressed and coming out of the page. On my own website, I chose to actually do it we had a crest made, like an alternate logo made in the business. And so I used it in the top left-hand corner of this green background and made it look like my logo was pressed into the background. Now, I did also use it on a piece of text. Again, this is a section which otherwise you could say is not the most visually interesting, but adding the parchment paper background and the embossing onto the parchment paper, I feel like this one looks really unique. We can see some embossing with the text right here, And then also, it's very faint, it's hard to pick up, but on the brown background of the Chris Loves Julia website, just to the right of the door image, we can actually see they have also embossed and pressed in their Chris Loves Julia logo into the brown background. Now, doing something like this, the embossing on your website isn't the easiest thing in the world. You definitely need some Photoshop skills to make this happen. So this is something which I think is going to be not done in the mass market sense. I think it's going to be something where people who are specifically working with a custom website designer, they're going to be having this on their website more often. But for people who are DIYing their website, I think this one actually is going to be out of most people's design capabilities, meaning that I don't think it'll take over quite as much as some of the other trends that we discussed because it's just more difficult to pull off. In terms of who this trend works really well for, obviously any sort of heritage feeling type brand, this is going to be a beautiful trend to make use of. And in terms of how much longer it still has in it, I would give this one quite a few years actually, because it's still very new. It's not something that you're commonly seen. It's not something that I think will dominate as much as some other trends, so it's not going to be quickly overdone. Trend number 7 is what I'm calling the random photo scroll and fade. This is what it looks like. Let me show you what I mean. On Caitlin James's website, we have randomly dispersed and placed photos, text happening down the middle, and then as I scroll through this section, then the whole section starts actually fading out and there's a fade over the text to move on to the next section. On this photographer's website, we will see the same thing. So we have some text happening in the middle, then we have randomly placed photos that are coming up, and then the whole section just fades away. Same thing on my website. I did this also here. Randomly dispersed place photos, typically vertical images, and then the whole section fades into itself. And finally, on this heirloom template, we see it happening here as well. Random picture, random picture, random picture. They also have some text moving too. And then at the end, the whole thing fades out into the next section. So when to use this? If you have a lot of good quality photos, then this is a fabulous place to use them. I feel like this works really well for any sort of photo heavy website or brand. It also makes a lot of sense when you want to have a big chunk of text on the page, but still keep some visual interest. And also if you want to have a bit more animation and a bit more of a dynamic website, the fading also achieves that effect too. Now this one is also one which I would say it's not impossible, but it is a little bit harder for the average person to pull off. So I feel like, again, this one won't dominate as much. The embossing is more difficult to do than this is, but it does take some skill and real in-depth knowledge of your website building platform to actually figure out how to achieve this on most website building platforms. So again, I don't think that we're gonna mass market see this one happening everywhere. Granted, it wasn't massively difficult for me to find a few examples of websites that are doing this one. So it is out there, it is existing now, but I definitely see this one continuing as a trend throughout the entirety of this year and probably into the next couple too. Trend number 8 is the folding over section movement. So how a normal website scrolls is you just go from seeing one section to the next section to the next section on the page. But what you'll see here is when one section, the lower section, starts to come up and overlap the section above it. We can see it on this Lewis & Co. website as I scroll down and we start having one fold over the other, fold over the other. And also on the Embossed Studio website, we can see this is their portfolio page and their portfolio pieces scroll over top to hide the portfolio pieces behind it. So when to use this one, I wouldn't do this on every section of your website by any means, that would probably be too much. But if there's a section that you really feel like is interesting, or also sections with similar content in them, for example, if you had 3 different service offerings, or on a portfolio page where you're showing one portfolio piece after the next, after the next, after the next, some sections that have similar ideas of the content that is the topic of the section, this is a great place to use this trend. I will say that this trend specifically is really massively widely applicable. I think that this is something which can fit almost any brand, almost any business. It looks very modern no matter which kind of website you put it on. And it even works for, we've talked a lot about heirloom, we've talked a lot about nostalgia in this video, and honestly, this trend still even actually fits with those vibes. It doesn't seem like it should, but it does still work actually. Trend number 9, we have the mega text. On personal brand websites, I see this a lot with people's names. On business brand websites, they incorporate it in other ways. You really can't have that much text in the mega text because it just takes up so much space on the website. But on the Embossed Studio website, we can see they have the Our Work scrolling through in mega text, which is a nice way to use it. Caitlin James has used it as her actual name. This business website has used it for Explore My Work. This Squarespace template has used it for Renew Health in the background of these images. And this Tonic Site Shop website has used it for the term martini, and then also for Shake Up the Future of Content. So this is a trend which I feel like is not dying. It started actually a couple of years ago. This is not new. This has been definitely in my last trends video that I made, and it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. People are loving it, and so therefore it's still a vibe, and it's still happening in brand new website designs these days. To be honest, it does look fantastic. It can be really interesting. It's a nice way to use font to sort of add visual interest to a page in a section. So while I wouldn't say that this feels fresh necessarily, because again, it has been around, I do think this one is still going to continue. Now, in terms of when to use it, I would say, as we can see in the websites here, use it for names, use it for a couple of words, use it for a heading. Again, not too many words in the heading, but don't use it for an entire paragraph or anything. That would just be way too overwhelming. Trend number 10, this one is totally different than basically all of the other ones we've actually been talking about, and that is spring colors. I made an entire separate video just on colors and understanding picking colors for your websites and the seasons of colors, and I will link that above and below in case you want to watch it too. This might make a lot more sense then, but basically every single color in the rainbow can be in different seasons, and spring colors are not just yellows and just pinks or just greens. It is a certain hue and shade of every single color in the rainbow. This floral website is bringing massive spring vibes with just the shades that they've chosen to use for a wide variety. They have green, they have pink, they have orange, they have blue, and all of them feel very spring-like. And you know how earlier I showed you a photographer website which went for the like dark and moody saturated colors vibe? This is a photographer website that went for the spring colors vibe. So it just goes to show that this isn't specific to one industry. Photographers can go for either way. It's really just depends on their own personal vibe and style. Harkin Bloom's website has used this trend. This Maya Jones Squarespace template has used this trend. We're even getting some serious neon vibes happening in this one here. Caitlin James has really gone for it with the spring colors, this website redesign. This Mishi template has used a lesser number of colors than some of the other ones. A lot of these spring colors websites, interestingly, don't just use like a normal, let's say, number of colors for a website. Normal being like, I don't know, 1, 2, 3 colors for a website. Most of them are actually going for like quite a bit more than that. They're really mixing quite a number of colors together. The Mishi one does tone it down a little bit. There's like 2 main colors, I would say, happening on this website. We have some blues and we have a like peachy, pinky, purpley color. We also have the Habit Tea Company, and we can see that Eamon and Beck have gone for a lot of spring colors happening here, both in their products and their packaging, and then also they've infused that and brought that into the website, so it looks really cohesive. And again, what we can see in this spring colors website is they're not just sticking to 2 or 3 colors, they're actually using a lot of colors. Now, I would say that this is a trend which doesn't play as well with some of the others that we've been discussing. This one really is sort of a trend of its own, something which is quite unique this year, and this wouldn't really fit super well with textured backgrounds or moody rich tones. These are just 2 completely different things. You can't really have moody rich tones and spring all on one website, or that'd be quite tough to pull off. It could work with nostalgia if your idea of nostalgia is like 60s, 70s vibes, but otherwise this is one which is like, if this is your brand vibe, I would lean hard into this and probably not mix it with too many of the other trends that we've been discussing. Now, in terms of how long this one has been around for, I would say there have always been brands and businesses which had this, like, especially when it comes to child-related businesses, this has always been a vibe, but I am seeing it more being brought into completely different companies that you wouldn't necessarily normally expect to have that sort of like spring childlike feel to them. So this one is being rolled out into the mainstream quite recently, actually, and so if this feels like your kind of thing, then now's a great time to hop on this trend because it's not overdone by any means yet. Now, the one mistake in implementation of this one, which I would say, is that sometimes you do need to also still think about when you're designing a website and you're using color on a website, you want the color to lead a person's eye to the most important thing on that page and section. And if you use too many colors in a certain section, the eye kind of doesn't know where to go, and then everything's sort of just shouting for attention, which means that nothing ends up standing out in that case. So do still be conscious of contrast, do still be conscious of really trying to lead the eye somewhere and making your call to action in that section stand out, even if you're using spring colors. And it definitely can be done, but it's just something to watch out for. Now that you know what's in, let's fix what is currently dating your website. Watch this video next for the outdated website design trends to ditch before a client says, "This feels very 2022. Awkward."